Hello guys, thank you so much for being here today. In this video, I'm going to show you how to paint water droplets in watercolor. I'm also going to show you how to paint this really pretty leaf and how to put the water droplets on the leaf. So let's get into it. So I went out to my garden where I have this giant loofah plant and I was immediately drawn to this leaf. So this is the one I chose. I brought it back to my desk and started playing around with how water droplets looked on it, and I used this as a reference for the painting. So I used the leaf as a reference and sketched it out and made sure to include all of the points. I also wanted to include the really pretty veining that it has on the leaf because we're going to include that later in the final piece. So I started with my lightest color, which is yellow, and I did a light yellow wash across the entire leaf. While the leaf is still wet from the yellow, I added the green. And using my leaf as a reference, I noticed that the green follows the veining pattern, and so I just kind of dabbed the green on in the same veining pattern. My loofah leaf is also prickly around the entire edge, and so I took a light yellowish green color and took the tip of my brush to create that prickly stroke around the entire edge of the leaf, and then kind of filled it in as I went along. Okay, so now that my leaf is dry, I am penciling in the water droplets. And the fun thing about water droplets is they're really any shape and size, so feel free to go crazy with them. Now I'm going to be using masking fluid to mask off the reflection spot on each water droplet. So I'm using the tiniest little bit to make a little line on the upper left edge of the water droplet. So I'm imagining my light source is coming from the upper left, and so that's the angle that the reflection spot will be, and you want it to be as close to the edge of that water droplet as you can get. Now that the masking fluid is totally dry, I'm starting on the water droplets. You want to use a darker pigment on your water droplets than you did on your leaf. So it can be the same color, but it just needs to be slightly darker than your leaf so that it pops out. So where you put that pigment along the top, it only goes about halfway along the droplet. And then when you come down on the bottom of the droplet, you're going to be doing a shadow, and it goes about halfway on each side as well. So with the bottom shadow, you want it to be dark right along the edge of the droplet, but then you want it to feather out and look really natural. And on the top of the droplet, you really just want it to blend and look really smooth as a transition into the rest of the droplet. Now, I don't think water droplets are complicated, but they can be really time consuming because I fiddle around a lot with making sure I've got the right amount of pigment around the shadow and that everything's feathered out. I make sure that I've got enough pigment up in that line by the reflection, and so I'm going to speed through most of the droplets because it's a lot of just continuing to fiddle with adding darkness, feathering it out, adding darkness, blending it in, and so you'll see that process in just a second. When I'm feathering things out, I usually will clean my brush, get water on my brush, and then just really kind of water down, feather the edges, meaning I'm just trying to blend them into the background. Harsh lines and edges will really ruin this illusion we're creating with the water droplets because water droplets are very curved, and so we just want everything to blend in that moon shape. So continuing to get my brush wet, dabbing it on the paper towel, and removing and blending paint, pigment, and water throughout the whole process. Now that it's dry, I'm going to remove the masking fluid and show you how I fix up these edges. Because masking fluid can sometimes be too thick, not as detailed, we're going in with a dark pigment to really fix up those lines around the top and around the bottom, and then continuing to blend that out. And now I'm just going to continue to add pigment and water to blend around the reflection spot and the shadow for all of the water droplets. Now that our water droplets are finished, we need to add more of a reflection brightness in the lower end of the water droplet. So I'm taking a clean brush with lots of water on it, dabbing at that lower end of the water droplet, scraping it off, kind of scraping at it with the brush against the paper, and then dabbing it with paper towel. And you can see how much brighter that spot is right in that corner. And it really gives the illusion that not only do you have a reflection line up at the top, but the actual water droplet itself has reflection in it in that lower half. And that illusion is also helped with the darkness that we've created on the upper left side as well. You'll notice that when you create that lighter bright spot in the lower end of the droplet that you can lose some definition and some of that gradual blending. So definitely feel free to add more paint. Like I said earlier, with water droplets, I tend to fidget around with it a lot, right? So take away, add, take away to get that perfect balance of everything blending. Now I'm going in with a really dark lined pigment that I'm not going to blend very well. I really want a stark line along that shadow line. So I'm going in and just making sure to add that around any droplet that looks maybe a little too fuzzy. So because water droplets are reflective, that lower area where we've added that brightness is also reflecting slightly onto the leaf. So we're also going to take away some of the pigment using that scratching technique with our brush right at the base of the water droplet. So you can see if we take away some of that pigment, it gives the illusion that the water droplet is reflecting that light that's coming in through it at the upper left corner. So some of the smaller droplets had a hard time retaining their reflection line at the top. And so I'm adding just a little bit of white gouache to that upper reflection line. I'm also highlighting some of the ones that did stay, but that need a little bit more brightness. Now the droplets are finished, and so I'm finishing up the details with the leaf by using my leaf that I have as a reference to really get the veining in. Adding more veining and texture will really make this leaf come to life, which will make the water droplets look even more realistic. So there's a lot of light green veins towards the ends of the leaf. I didn't want to take too much away from the water droplets and the darker veining, and so what I'm doing is I'm taking a light wash of green, kind of dabbing it on in the areas where that veining is, and then using my paper towel to dab it off. So it's giving the illusion of that texture, of that veining, but it's not overwhelming and too busy. So my reference leaf has these dead spots, parts of the leaf where they're brown and crunchy, and I really feel like when I added these brown spots to the leaf, it top of the veins, I am adding a really light line to give the illusion that we can just barely see the veining within the water droplet. Now, it's not going to be super visible. There's a water droplet over the top, but I just wanted it to be very slightly seen so that we don't just completely lose the veining, because then you're adding again to that realism that the water droplets are actually there over the top of it. And there she is, our little loofah leaf with our watercolor droplets on top. I absolutely loved creating this tutorial. I love painting water droplets. I hope you had a great time watching this. If you would like to see more tutorials all about watercolor, follow me right here on YouTube. Have a great day, guys.